Hello, I'm going to go through with you today, as promised, the reading framework that came out in July 2021 at the end of what was a very, very challenging, difficult year. We were then given yet another DfE guidance document, this time focusing on the teaching of reading in its entirety. So here we go, huge document. I've now digested it. I have thought about it, I have made notes, I've rolled my eyes, I've said yes, I've said no, but all of the things within this document have all given me food for thought, so that's good. I want to talk to you about things I agree with, things that I disagree with, things that maybe are too prescriptive and they worry me a little bit when things are too prescriptive, because I think teachers lose their essence and their passion and what makes them them if they are purely following the letter of the law. Now, this is not a statutory document, it is guidance. As an English lead, I think it's essential reading. You need to read it yourselves, but hopefully this video will help you digest it and also give you a bit more food for thought. So I'm going to share my screen with you today. It's a lot to get through. I won't cover everything. I'm going to cover the things that I feel need to be spoken about. So the reading framework, obviously, as I've said, came out in July 2021. Now, at the beginning of the document, the Minister of State for School Standards, Nick Gibb, talks about how over the last couple of decades, we are beginning to have a deepening understanding of the fundamental importance of reading. Now, as teachers, I feel like we have this fundamental understanding already. It's embedded within us. We make sure that reading's at the core of our schools. So if he's just realising that, that's fine. And yes, we do have a deepening understanding. Our practice is always evolving, always getting better. And I think the best teachers are always reflecting on what they do. So whilst this document is useful for everybody, and as I say, all English leads should read this, I think it's important to bear in mind that this is guidance. It's a group of people's take on what makes the best teaching of reading. And as I say, there are some parts of the document that I do disagree with, and I will point out what those are. That said, there's an awful lot of really quality information within here, so I'm not going to dismiss it like it's not worth reading, because it definitely is. Okay, so the purpose of the guidance is, as I say, Nick Gibbs quotes here, it's over the last couple of decades, there's a fundamental importance. We've understood there's a fundamental importance of improving reading standards on a child's future academic achievements, their well-being and their success in life. Even more significantly, being a highly engaged reader has the potential to allow a child to overcome their background. They're Nick Gibbs' words. What made me giggle a little bit is that teachers seem to now have a value, and they've suddenly realised in this quote here that children do not just become readers. It doesn't happen by magic. However, and reading engagement is not possible if children struggle with the basic mechanics of reading. So how do they get there? Well, fluency and enjoyment are the result of careful teaching and frequent practice. So teachers do have a value. We are doing something right. Thank you, Nick, for pointing that out to us. Before I go on throughout this document, I just want to say, for me, as I say all of the time in all of my videos, the biggest difference that we can make to children is because if the influence that we have as teachers, the passion that we have when we deliver whatever it is we're teaching, if we're passionate about it, if we love it and truly feel excited about what we're teaching, the children will do better because they are influenced by our feelings and our emotions and how we feel about the delivery of something. So they do mention that within this book, not quite in the same words, but it is all about the influence that the teacher has, the passion that the teacher has, and obviously the teacher's understanding of why we do things, how we do them, and what we do. So our understanding of how to teach reading has to be really quite strong. And if you're new to teaching, or you've had a move in year group and you're lower down the school now and you aren't familiar with how to teach reading, then again this document will be really useful for you. A question that I know I'm going to be asked is, do we have to follow this guidance to the letter? So the word guidance tells us the answer there, really, in that it is just guidance. But what Nick does finish off his introduction saying is, I encourage all primary schools to use this guidance to ensure their children have the strongest possible foundations in reading. So yes, we can use this guidance, but we don't have to do everything it says, because even within this guidance, it tells you what kind of chair to sit on when you are delivering your story. Prescriptive overload, I think. However, it's a useful document, so I'm not going to be negative Nancy anymore. I'm just going to go through the useful bits with you. So the reading framework, an overview for you. The guidance aims are basically to set out the research to explain to people how important it is to talk, to share stories, to have a systematic synthetic phonics program in place, all of those things. I mean, I talk about these things all the time in my videos if you've been watching them. So that's great that that's what's in the guidance. So we're all in agreement there. Provide practical support for high quality teaching. Support schools to evaluate the teaching of early reading, and throughout the document there are audit materials that you can use and reflect and think about your current practice in line with what they suggest in the guidance, and then you can reflect and talk with your staff and think about where you're going forward, which is great practice. That's what we do as teachers all of the time. It explains the importance of the systematic synthetic phonics, teaching that to older children. So that's another addition that I'm really pleased is within there, because it's, as I say, in all of the training I do, it's important that the whole school are on board with the teaching of phonics and everyone has a deep understanding of how to support those children who are older, who still need that systematic, that synthetic approach. And I believe that that goes on throughout secondary school, throughout all of our lives. And how important it is that schools support parents. And again, on all of my training, I talk about those things. So they go in depth thinking about language comprehension, and that we've been talking about the deepening our children's vocabulary, giving them a broad range of rich and varied vocabulary in our teaching, and the explicit teaching of vocabulary. So this talks about how teachers might expand a children's store of words throughout the day just by talking to the children, by embedding that within explicit vocabulary teaching linked to their curriculum, and in particular through the sharing of stories. So it really talks quite in depth about different vocabulary teaching. And it also highlights the importance of the role of poetry, rhymes and songs in attuning children to the sounds of language. So there again is something I've been banging on about for quite a long time, about the importance of that phase one skill of rhyming and talking with rhythm and making sure that we're really engrossed in the sounds of language. It talks about the teaching of word reading and spelling, and talks about the fact the national curriculum is designed to make sure that all children are able to read and write fluently by the time they leave in year 6, and we all want that for our children, so that they can then go on to make further progress at secondary school. And a vital element of this is in the early stages is successful teaching of phonics. And by early stages, it doesn't just mean in reception in year 1, it means the early stages of learning to read and spell. Now, for some people that will come in EYFS or year 1 or year 2, but for other learners that might come in year 5 or year 6 or in secondary school, because they've missed it and they haven't had that quality teaching of reading. So don't read the vital element of that being just in the early stages of primary school. It actually goes on, it's talking about the early stages of learning to read. And for some people, that might be as an adult. It talks about the early career framework, and so that NQTs are no longer NQTs, they are now ECTs, early career teachers, and there's a whole new early career framework. And it talks about within here how all early career teachers need to learn about phonics, and says that the SSP that we use within our schools is the most effective approach for teaching children to be able to decode and to read. So we need to make sure our schools are really confident in sharing their expertise with any early career teachers that they have within their schools. It talks about children at risk of failure. and what we can do for those children. And it quite clearly says that Ofsted inspectors will pay particular attention to the pupils who are reading below their expected age. And inspectors will listen to children reading, observe lessons, consider the school's policies for the teaching of reading, and it will take into account the outcomes of the phonics assessment and data on the phonics screening checks. So it does make it quite explicit about what Ofsted inspectors will be looking for in terms of early reading. It also mentions about the COVID-19 recovery programmes that in schools we need to think about how we can make sure that we close that gap and we make sure the children catch up with where they would have been if they hadn't missed school due to the pandemic. So it's got all of that information. That's just the overview in there for you. So first of all, the first section we're going to look at is the importance of reading and the conceptual model. This is all of these are quotes taken straight from the Reading Framework. This isn't me talking. So it talks about the real crucial nature of developing spoken language. We know how crucial it is that children have the opportunity to talk. If they can't talk it, if they can't say it, they won't be able to read it, they won't be able to write it. So all talk is useful, especially when it's directed to the child specifically. So for instance, if we want children to expand their language and vocabulary when they listen or join in with stories and rhymes, or watching a really good TV programme, having an adult who is there with them, engaged and present and talking to them about it is invaluable. And they talk about that so much. They also talk about the importance of book-related talk, making sure that children are immersed in a world of books, and books are at the real centre of everything we do with our children to make sure that they can expand their vocabulary. Reading for pleasure, they do mention that, which is brilliant because there's been such a massive push about getting decodable books and people have been panicking about that, but they do talk about the importance of reading for pleasure so that children love reading and have a real purpose for taking on this difficult task of learning to read. So make sure that children become engaged with reading from the beginning is one of the most important ways to make a difference to a child's life chances, regardless of their socioeconomic background. So what we really want to make sure is that every child loves reading and enjoys hearing stories. They talk about the importance of motivation and the cognitive difference between children who are avid readers and those who are not. So children who are good at reading do more of it and they learn more. And then they have a better vocabulary gained from their reading, and it increases their ease of access to reading. However, those children who fall behind have the opposite. They have less vocabulary, they fall behind, and it becomes a vicious cycle. So reading, we say it all the time, reading is key, and that's absolutely the case. If they are good readers, reading is key to the rest of the curriculum, and we can't say that enough. It's essential that by the end of their primary education, all pupils can read fluently, confidently, and they love to read. And that's the gift that we really need to focus on giving to the children. Economic and the social arguments, they talk about how important it is, crucial, that being able to read significantly will narrow the gap between those children who have and those children who have not. So we want to make sure that all children have, we want to make sure that their life opportunities are there for every single child, regardless of their economic and social background. So that's the sort of the reason behind why this guidance was written. So they talk about the simple view of reading, which is something I'm not going to go into in great detail. And the reason I'm not going to go into that in great detail is because I'm sure lots of you have already seen lots and lots of information about the simple view of reading. So that's the little grid that looks like this, where if you look in the document, it's all there. It will explain it all for you. I'm not going to go into that in detail because it is very simplistic, and reading is more than just that. But if you have a look at that, and you can have a read about that yourselves. So the next thing they talk about is talk. they go into it in depth, think about why language comprehension is so important. So they talk about having a language-rich environment. And for such a long time, people insisted that that meant labelling everything in sight, having a laminated label on every single object. Anything that didn't move, put a label object on there. And whilst that has a purpose, and it's good to have labels so that the children have text around them, a language-rich environment is all about conversation. It's all about being present with your children and talking to them, modelling how to have a conversation when you talk, and you then listen and you respond appropriately, expanding their vocabulary, not dumbing down your language, but using a wide range of words with young children. That's a language-rich environment, and they talk a lot about that within the guidance. Reducing the language gap between those children who are at home whose parents are not potentially talking to them about different experiences and what they're watching on TV and books they're sharing, and those children who have deep conversations with their family every day. It's about reducing that gap so that the children have heard a wide range of subjects, know lots of information, and again, when they access literature in written form or writing it themselves, the language gap is not there. The quality interactions, they talk about what they are in great detail, and they talk about and exemplify how you can have a quality interaction with a child. For me, it kind of made me a little bit when I saw those, purely because if they feel that the teachers who are currently in their job role don't know how to interact with children, then they're not really showing that they have much faith in us as a profession. However, potentially some people will find that information useful. So if you think you would like to have it spelt out to you about how to have a quality interaction with a child, then feel free to go and have a look. Now, the bits that I've got in red with question marks are bits that made me a little bit, well, wanting to scream. So it talks about careful and deliberate planning. And for me, for lots of you, you know that I'm very much an in-the-moment practitioner, planning in the moment, being present with the children and going with the child's interests. If we think that we can only develop a child's language and comprehension through careful and deliberate planning, then I question why we're in the classroom in the first place. If we are with the children and we are present and they are engrossed and engaged in something that they are interested in that moment, as adults, as experienced adults with a wide range of vocab, I think I am able to plan in that moment and give them lots of new words, lots of new vocab, lots of new explanation. I'll be able to think of a story that I know that links with that, and I can do it in that moment based on what the child is interested in there and then. So the whole concept about having careful and deliberate planning, I feel like it's going back to a time that I don't want to go back to. Now, that's just me as a professional. So that is what made me go, ah! On that. Go to page 22 within the guidance if you want to see their example. If you don't, and you don't want to get frustrated, then don't go to page 22. So for me, the language comprehension is about having a language-rich environment that has conversations, reducing the language gap, making sure that every child within your school, regardless of their background, has access to an adult who is present and interested and willing to share and talk to the children. Having quality interactions is by far the best teaching strategy we can have with the children. If you are there and haven't got a clipboard and constantly writing things down and taking photos and taking evidence, having the quality interactions with the children is what will help the children do better, and making sure that they have lots of that second tier vocabulary explored in wide context once the children know a story well. Teaching that explicit vocabulary, you will see a massive difference in their language comprehension. And as I put at the bottom, just be present. That is the biggest difference to language comprehension. Making eye contact with the children, making sure that you are there with them, having a conversation with them, by far the best teaching strategy in my opinion. Listening, we talk about, I've spoken about this phase 1 skill, this quality foundations, whatever it is you want to call it. Modeling how to be a good listener, expecting the children to listen to, having lots and lots and lots of practice of listening and what it looks like and how to rehearse and tune into sounds around you. Again, page 23 of the guidance tells you explicitly how you praise children when they show good listening. If you want to read that, read it. This is the kind of prescriptive stuff that gets up my nose a little bit, because I'm not going to praise a child like Sally is next door. It's totally, I feel like it's totally inappropriate to tell a teacher, a professional who's trained for a really long time, what words to use when they praise a child. Page 24 also talks about how you can talk in pairs, how children should talk in pairs. If you think that information is useful for you, go ahead and look at page 23 and 24. Practices that reduce interactions. They talk quite clearly about things that they don't like and they don't want to see, which is interesting. So collecting evidence, the quote taken directly from the guidance says, teachers do not have to collect evidence of children's achievements for the early years foundation stage profile. They don't have to. So just remember, every time you take a picture and stop an interaction, a quality interaction where you can really engage with the children, every time you stop to do that, think, why am I doing that? What are the children getting from that? Do the children really care if you have written down an observation of something you've just seen, or would they get more from you being present with them in that moment? It's something to think about. Yes, it's nice to have learning journeys where the parents can keep it forever and when they can show their own children, but think about what they're going to get the most benefit from. Every moment spent in observing, recording, collecting and compiling evidence takes teachers' time away from teaching, including the talking. So that's something to bear in mind. This one's all in red because, frankly, it just made me again go, oh, noisy environments, it's called. When children are learning to read and write, a noisy environment makes it difficult for them to hear what the teacher and other children are saying, particularly for those who have hearing difficulties or impairments, those with speech, language and communication needs, and those who find it difficult to pay attention. If these children cannot hear clearly, their chances of responding are immediately limited. Calm classrooms give them the best chance to interact and make progress in reading and writing. The reason I've got this in red and the reason this worries me is because this is open to misinterpretation. Yes, it's important that when you are delivering your whole class phonics session or your whole class reading session, that there are periods of quiet and calm so that the children can listen and focus to that direct teaching and learning that is happening. However, given that most early years classrooms in year 1 and now year 2, thank goodness, are becoming more about continuous provision, those classrooms are naturally going to have a buzz about them. If our head teachers are then thinking that this buzz is a noisy environment, then we're in danger of hindering the children's progress to become brilliant readers. And the reason we're hindering that potential is because in order for children to be able to be a good reader and writer, they need to be able to talk. Given that the whole last section was talking about language and talk and the importance and crucial nature of that, this paragraph worries me because misinterpretation could lead to quiet classrooms where chatter and talk is not happening. So this bit is something that we need to, yes, bear in mind when we are delivering our phonics and our direct teaching, but when you are in a continuous provision setting, there is going to be noise. But when you look around that room, are they all focused? Are they all engaged? Are they talking to develop that brilliant language comprehension, that talk that we want them to develop? If so, this whole paragraph needs to be thought about in the correct way. Yes, when we're doing direct teaching, but absolutely not when we are letting the children rehearse the skills that we want them to rehearse. Story times I talked about, which I was really quite happy about because I feel like story times are things that are quite often lost due to such a crammed timetable. Not so much in reception in year 1, but definitely throughout the school. And it says here, teachers are the best people to promote a love of reading, because the children, particularly the younger children, and I would argue that goes all the way through primary, care what the teachers think about stories read and want to hear them read aloud. I've added this blue bit at the bottom that says all children need stories read aloud, and I'm constantly pushing within my own school that teachers have an allotted time within their timetable where they read aloud to the children, because it's really crucial if we want to develop a love of reading. They also mention having a core read aloud stories that you have within your classes. So books that teachers will read aloud to the class to try and replicate for children what it feels like to have undivided attention. So it says quite clearly, this is why reading aloud should be a priority. So within my own school, we've adopted the Pye Corbett reading spine to make sure that we have that thread of quality texts throughout the school. We talk here about book corners, and the books themselves are the most important thing. So if you're a teacher who's more interested in the prettiness of your book area, you need to rethink about what your priorities are. Yes, it needs to be comfortable and inviting, but what they're saying within the guidance is that the reading area, the area itself, the most important part within that reading area is the books. So time will be better spent on making sure that you have quality, well-organised, well-loved books in there, rather than how beautiful the reading area looks. And ideally, every book corner should be like a mini library, for a place for a child to browse the books, revisit the books they like, read them with the teacher, and every child should be able to have access to the reading corner where they can enjoy that. As I said, it talks about here, every book in the corner should be worth reading aloud, not too many displayed at once, refreshing the displays, making them look attractive and easy to find, so not all crammed in and hard for the children to pull out. And a book that is dull and dog-eared and battered should be removed, unless it's a particularly well-loved one, and then I will probably get another copy of the book rather than it looking a mess and dog-eared and tatty. Making sure that we as teachers support children reading at home by helping the parents know how to read with their child at home as well. So poetry and rhymes is talked about again. As I've said, this is the phase 1 element coming in, as I've said before, that it goes throughout our reading journey. The predictability of rhymes and poems and songs helps children to use new words, new phrases, and acquire that new language that we want them to acquire. Learning poetry and songs is great for their speech and language, their confidence, embedding new words, and it's just an all-round brilliant thing to be able to do with the children. And they've suggested that teachers should identify a core set of poems for each year group that they will maybe potentially learn by heart, rehearse, practice, and enjoy. So that's all that about that section there. We're going to move on now to word reading and spelling. Section on what phonics is from page 38 to 44. We're not going to go into that. If you don't know what phonics is, you can go and have a look at that guidance, or you can watch all of my videos, or you could even buy my book Quality Phonics, which will talk to you about the passion, the understanding, the why and the how. Systematic synthetics phonics programs. Okay. So it is important not to confuse children, they've reiterated this point, by mixing material from different programs or across different classrooms. Hence the phrase fidelity to one scheme. I'm a little bit fed up with that sentence now. I've said it quite a lot. For example, they've given an example here. One program might use the term split digraph, which is the correct term that we should all be using, whilst another may refer to it as a magic E, for example, which we shouldn't be using anymore. We should be teaching the children the truth, in my opinion, and split digraph is the right term, that they are more than capable of understanding and knowing what it is. It also reiterates within the guidance, as I've said in previous videos, about common exception words, teaching them what makes it an exception, high frequency word lists, the bit about not sending lists of words home for children to learn with their parents, about capital and lowercase letters, that element about teaching the children that both the capital and the lowercase are called an A, but they make the sound A, and not confusing children by teaching that the capital is an A and the lowercase is an A. So that talks about all of that. It also suggests that daily phonics sessions should begin as soon as the children start their reception year, definitely. High quality class or group teaching is an efficient and effective way of ensuring good progress for the majority of children. However, for some children, we need to make sure that they may need extra support for phonics in addition to their normal phonics session. So that, again, great. The bit in red, however, says phonics sessions might only be 10 minutes in the first few days. However, by the end of reception, children will need to be working for an hour a day in their phonics session to consolidate previous learning. No, I'm not doing it. That's one thing I'm absolutely not even going to consider. It's not necessary. It's totally developmentally inappropriate for children of 4, 5 and 6 to be sat for an hour doing phonics. I love phonics, but it's just not necessary, not needed. There's certain schemes out there that push for this hour-long phonics session. I think for us to say that every scheme should follow that pattern is wrong, inappropriate, and is a big no from me. That's all I'm going to say on that. So I will be sticking to my 25-minute session at the end of my reception year because the children are flying doing that. They're confident readers, confident writers, confident spellers, and they don't need to sit there for an hour. That's the end of my little moan about that. So as I said here, when teachers are engaging and motivating, children mirror their teacher's mood and attitude, pay attention and enjoy learning. They say that within that. That's a direct quote. As I say, passion. If a teacher delivers their subject with passion, with enthusiasm, of course it's engaging. Of course the children are going to want to learn. It is the key to teaching children to read. It talks to you there about all of the different elements that you need to be able to teach your phonics session. So being clear, expecting all children to participate, making the most of the time, making sure that you maximise how they're applying it to reading and writing in every session. You can read that all of yourselves, but it's all the stuff that I've been saying in all of my training videos. There's nothing really new there at all. It says here that dictation is a vital part of the phonics session, which again is, I've said that. Children don't need to be using their time to think of a sentence. They just need to be given the sentence and rehearse the physical skill of writing it and applying their GPC knowledge to the writing, the dictated sentence you've given them. It also says that schools should really consider the advantages of delaying the teaching of joined handwriting, again, which is a big yes from me. With plenty of practice in writing from dictation, children will find it easier to write independently. There's a bit highlighted at the bottom that they say extra time for writing is unnecessary at this early stage. Again, I feel like this is open to misinterpretation. For me, the children are taught the skills in their daily phonics session to be able to apply that to reading and writing. The extra time for writing isn't unnecessary at this stage. If they want to go and write, then that is brilliant. That's what we want them to do, but not adult-led. If we're interpreting this sentence as not being adult-led, not necessary, I 100% agree. However, we do want the children to go off into their play and rehearse all of the skills that they have been practicing within their phonics session. So extra writing is not unnecessary at this early stage. It's part of the journey. So again, this is something that I think is open to perhaps being misinterpreted, and I just wanted to clarify that point. As teachers, at first teachers should support children to compose sentences out loud, that important talk. If you think about that thing about noisy classrooms, does that mean they have to do that in silence and just... Anyway, and as their spelling develops, they should have dictated sentences, and then they'll be able to apply their GPC knowledge to their writing, and we should be happy when they write things like me and my friends went into a cafe and had cakes, because they're writing phonetically. It then says, as children's knowledge of the alphabetic code increases, teachers should encourage correct spelling. It doesn't tell you how, though. It doesn't tell you how you should do that. But I'm going to plug my book here now, which I never really do, but I'm going to start doing it. In my book, Quality Phonics, it tells you a brilliant strategy that I came up with all on my own about how you can do that from reception. And the people who read the book and started using this strategy have been blown away by it. So I'm going to just do a shameless plug there. If you want to be able to teach your children how to start spelling correctly, Quality Phonics book is for you. Okay, go back to this now. Well-organised teaching spaces allow children to focus on what they're learning. The resources should be accessible. We should have any flashcards and freezes and posters and sound charts, and all of those things that are related to your SSP programme should be accessible for the children to use as and when they need to. So then it goes on to talk about the activities that can hinder children's learning. If children do not practice reading and writing enough, they will fail to make sufficient progress. Activities must be high quality, practical, and there to achieve the goal, which is being able to read, write, and spell. So they say, again, they've reiterated this point, that activities such as painting, colouring, modelling, playing in the sand, water, blah, 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 all those things that practitioners are doing to make it exciting are actually taking away from the main purpose of the phonics session. So within your phonics session, those activities should be avoided. Correct spelling without so activities that can hinder. So correcting a child's spelling without appreciating that a child has identified the sound correctly but not the correct grapheme. Okay, so that can hinder the child. But then demonstrating phonetically plausible but incorrect spellings, as you as the teacher when you're modelling it, that may make the child remember the wrong spelling. So on one hand, they don't want you to correct the spelling when they've used the wrong grapheme. And then on the other hand, they don't want you to demonstrate how to use phonetically plausible attempts at words. So what do they want you to do? Again, my book will explain what you should do here. I won't mention it again, promise. Tell a story about a sound or a letter with so much detail that children focus on the story more than what they are learning. So I know there are lots of phonics schemes out there that do have stories that go with the characters. Just make sure those stories are not too elaborate, that the children actually focus on the story rather than what they're actually learning. Poor classroom routines, giving them an activity within your phonics session that is so elaborate, so difficult that you spend more time explaining what they've got to do than them actually rehearsing and applying their phonics skills. Children who aren't seated looking at the teacher, children are not shown how to use the classroom resources properly. So everything we use within our phonics teaching should then be used so that they can use it on their own, so the children can use it independently. Posters and charts, other than the school's selective phonics programme, are decorating the classroom. You don't want things printed off from different websites when your phonics charts look different. So you need to make sure that you are using the same thing all of the time so that the children are not getting confused. Another red one. Sitting on the floor and writing on a mini whiteboard does not help children learn to hold a pencil and form letters correctly. To write, they should sit comfortably on a chair at a table. Using a whiteboard also means there's no paper. Also, using a whiteboard means there's no paper record of what the child has done. I don't know where to begin with this one. So, sitting on a carpet when you're 4, looking at your teacher, there is nothing wrong with that. I've been doing that for years, and the children in my class have always exceeded in the expected progress that they make. Writing on a whiteboard is smoother. It's less pressure because they can rub it off really quickly if they've made a mistake. They can hold the pen and it glides. They don't need as much control with their hand because the pen glides. The children love writing on whiteboards straight away. it just works. So saying that it doesn't work is not true. It does. Children also are not at the age of 4 and 5 physically ready to be sat at a table for their hour-long session that they suggested writing. They're not. They need to develop their core strength, and to be able to develop their core strength, sometimes children like lying on their tummy to write. Sometimes they like standing up and writing on a vertical surface. Sometimes they will like to stand up at a desk and write. Having children sat at desks when they are 4 and 5 years old is not developmentally appropriate. Not only that though, I don't have enough chairs and tables in my classroom to accommodate a whole class sat at a table learning for their hour-long phonics lesson, sitting at a table. No, I'm not doing that either. I'm perfectly happy with how my practice is going in this regard. I will never have a reception classroom that has enough tables to sit that many children all at the same time. And neither will my year 1 class look like that either. So no. Yes, at some point the children need to learn to sit at a table with good posture to develop their handwriting style. At the very beginning stages, that is not appropriate. They need to develop their core strength, they need to develop their confidence, and they need to develop their willingness to have a go. In terms of there being no paper record of the work, firstly, did they not just say we don't need to collect evidence? I think they did. And secondly, there's this amazing invention called a camera that you can take a photo of their whiteboard if you do want to have evidence. It's amazing, honestly. I think it might catch on. Anyway, that's enough sarcasm there. For those SEND colleagues who are out there, we have a whole few pages, page 55 to 57, basically telling you that you need to do exactly what all of the other schools do to make sure that the children learn how to read. I know that's going to upset lots of people who find it very difficult and are working on lots of different strategies to support their children with quite severe and complex needs. So yeah, I'm not going to comment on that. I've said before, I'm not a specialist. I'm more than willing to help where I can, but I'm not a specialist in that area. It talks about developing fluency. Fluency is a big deal. From pages 57 to 61, it explains what fluency is. Being able to read words at a glance is used a lot throughout the document, so something that you will be hearing quite a lot of. I'm going to stop right there, and I will do part 2 of this video tomorrow for you, in the hope that you haven't fallen asleep. I hope you found it useful so far, and I will speak to you soon.